Hello, my name is Lee Presser. This is my show. I speak frequently to very interesting people. Some of these conversations are so exciting, so intellectually stimulating, I thought others might like to listen in. This is the reason we started recording Conversation with Lee Presser.
Welcome to Conversation with Lee Presser. The St. Louis County Police Department serves a population of over 1 million and covers an area larger than 500 square miles. Currently, the department employs 1,100 persons, and it has a budget of more than $113 million per year. The department operates under the control of a civilian board of commissioners appointed by the county executive with the approval of the majority of the county council. The commissioners appoint the chief of police. Our guest today is Tim Fitch, the former chief of police. He was 18 years old when he took a job with the Cahokia Police Department. 3 years later, he went to work for St. Louis County Police, rising through the ranks. Tim Fitch was named chief in 2009 and retired on February 1st, 2014, after a 34-year career in law enforcement. He is currently working in the private sector after establishing his own business, Fitch Consulting Group, LLC. His organization provides media and public safety consulting to corporate, security, and governmental organizations. Chief Fitch is the elected president of the Missouri Peace Officers Association, an organization of more than 1,300 federal, state, and local officers throughout the state of Missouri. Chief Tim Fitch, welcome to Conversation.
Thanks for inviting me.
So what do these 1,300 members of your organization think about what has become of the position of the police in the community since the Ferguson events of August the 9th?
Very concerned. Although I'll have to tell you it was somewhat predictable that it was heading down this path.
How so?
It was predictable in that we had been engaged in the 90s and heavily engaged in something called community policing, where we really got engaged with our neighborhoods and got to know our neighborhoods, got to know the people in our neighborhoods, good and bad. And it seemed in policing in the last 5 to 7 years where local governments, instead of using their police in the community policing mode, said, listen, we can't raise taxes anymore. You know, our communities are declining. We need more revenue to keep what we have. So they turned to their police departments and said, we want you to get out there and start writing more tickets, making more arrests. We need to generate more revenue to keep our cities going. And I will tell you that the vast majority of the membership of my organization were absolutely against using the police in that manner, recognizing that this was hurting our relationship with the community. So it was pretty predictable what we saw happen, and it all came to a head in Ferguson.
Who, not by name, but who were the people that were instructing the police to change their method of policing?
It's pretty obvious. It was in many cases mayors of cities, finance managers, city managers, and I think we've seen some of that in the DOJ report, where you have the finance manager in Ferguson. So here's a guy that's in charge of finances for a city government suggesting to the police chief by email that he go out on 270 and take his troops out there to have a safety initiative on 270 to enforce speeding violations. What does that have to do with safety? Why is a finance manager, wanting to do that? Clearly it was about money and it was about revenue. And that's not what the majority of the police officers that I know, that's not why we got into this business, is to generate revenue for government. And that's what's been going on. So
you've indicated an advanced knowledge of this. I mean, this was generally well known before August the 9th of 2014.
Do a Google search and put in my name and Charlac Police. Charlac is a small municipality in the middle part of St. Louis County. And you can see that I battled with the Charlac mayor and police chief over their insistence on safety on I-170 to put speed cameras on the interstate highway.
They have
Charlac
50 feet or something?
They have 19 yards of space of 170. And they said there had been so many accidents in Charlac on 170 that they had to put these cameras out there.
Right there in their 19 yards.
Right there in their 19 yards. And they had to put these cameras out there to slow people down to reduce the accidents. And I knew all along it was about revenue. Charlac was well known for being a ticket writing agency. And that's pretty much all they were known for, is ticket, ticket, ticket. Well, here's another ticket scheme. They can extract more dollars for their community. And I cried foul, was on the front page of the Post-Dispatch, and said, this is hurting law enforcement's reputation in the community. when the community knows that you're out there to generate revenue and it's not about safety.
Right. Now, one could could ask, were these people actually violating the laws? And the answer would be?
In some cases. What Sherlock said is, listen, if you're not doing 15 miles over the limit, excuse me, if you're not doing 75 and a 60, you have nothing to worry about coming through here. Well, they had some violators that were doing that. As we all drive the interstates, we see that. And I will tell you that's a pretty high speed for even an interstate highway to be that much over the limit.
Yeah.
But they ended up reducing that number because they weren't getting enough tickets or generating enough revenue. They got to where they were down to 8 miles over the limit. On a 4-lane interstate highway, actually it's 6-lane, 3 in each direction, and they weren't getting enough tickets, so they kept lowering the threshold of when they would issue a ticket, so they could get more and more violators to generate more and more revenue. And I will tell you that if you're doing it about generating revenue, that's the wrong reason to do it.
Mm-hmm. I believe I told you in a private conversation about an event that included me in that. I was driving on, not on 170, but I was near 170 on Natural Bridge Road in Bell Ridge. And all of a sudden I was stopped by a police officer. I hadn't the faintest idea. I had just made a left turn from Natural Bridge onto the on-ramp of 170, and he stops me. I had no idea. So he writes this ticket, and he could barely explain to me what the ticket was. So I wound up in their municipal court. Before I knew it, I mean, I got there at like 6:30. By the end of that day, or that evening, I'd been handcuffed twice, thrown into a filthy jail cell. And no excuses were made. You know, no, I was never written up, nothing. So I understand that these courts are completely out of control. Would you agree with me that perhaps these municipal courts need to be disbanded like they're doing in Ferguson, but all of them, and all these people put under I'm talking about the violators, should be sent to an associate circuit court?
And I will tell you that yes, in many circumstances, however, with the caveat of this. If you're going to shut down all the municipal courts, then the St. Louis County Prosecutor's Office will need to seriously increase their staff, as will the St. Louis County Associate Circuit Court. Because you just can't transfer all those cases out of the municipal court over and tell the county do it with the same staffing. So as long as you have the staffing that covers it and space requirements and all those different things, and I'll have to tell you that municipal courts, for me, it was something I'd never heard of when I started my law enforcement career in St. Louis County, Missouri. Because remember, I started in Cahokia, Illinois, and there's no such thing as municipal courts in Illinois. If a Cahokia police officer wrote a traffic ticket in Cahokia, it went to a St. Clair County judge. Mm-hmm. It did not go to a Cahokia municipal judge appointed by the mayor of Cahokia, who obviously would have a good reason for having a prosecutor or a judge that would look after his best interests and the city's best interests when it comes to revenue. So I always thought, and there's not a lot that I like to say as far as governance goes that's great about Illinois, and I could say that being from Illinois, 21 years in Illinois. However, not having municipal courts in Illinois is a good thing. So will that happen in Missouri? No, I don't think it will in our lifetime where municipal courts will go away, but I think you're about to see some very, very significant changes to the municipal court structure.
Mm-hmm. Excuse me, one last thing about the municipal courts. These judges are not trained judges. They're simply attorneys who've been hired, as you just said, by mayors or the city councils to run their courts. And they're not even supervised by the Missouri Supreme Court either. And some of these judges actually see themselves as being completely outside of anybody's guidance other than their own city hall.
It's about keeping the person that appointed you to the position happy. And if the mayor says, hey, I need you to increase fines, we need to have a discussion about additional revenue, quit locking people up and get money from them instead, and all those things that I've heard through all these years, it really is about the money in these municipal courts. And if you're a judge in a municipal court and you're not doing the right thing, and that means fining people and bringing in money for the city, the mayor will find somebody else that will do that.
Mm-hmm. Now, there is a discussion about a report which was recently, by the way, so that people who are listening to this, today is March the 10th of 2015. Not that many days ago, the Department of Justice released a report about their findings on the city of Ferguson, in particular the police department of Ferguson. Have you looked at this? Are you familiar with this report?
I have.
And what is your professional opinion of that?
Mixed. I was a little surprised, to be completely honest with you, about the fact that Ferguson itself was engaged in the revenue generating business, the police department there. I will tell you that of all the cities I was critical about in my time as chief, Ferguson wasn't one of them. As a matter of fact, I will tell you that we saw in law enforcement in the county, we saw Ferguson as one of the more professional agencies in North St. Louis County, comparatively speaking. So when I read the report and I saw all this discussion with city officials and the police chief and different people within the department about generating revenue and more tickets and increasing the budget for the municipal courts and all these things, I was a little surprised by that. The other thing that it heavily talked about was the racial disparity that was going on as far as those that were being targeted for the tickets and arrests and things like that. I don't know that all that's completely accurate. Just looking at numbers, you cannot draw a picture on those kind of things. I can't tell you that I know specifically that Ferguson police officers were racially targeting people. What I do know from reading that is they were clearly targeting people, all people, anybody that they could find to write tickets to generate revenue for the city. That's pretty obvious. But do I think it was about race? Just happened to be, I think, the fact that the area is heavily African American. Not just the city, but the whole area. Ferguson is really the retail hub for North St. Louis County. So you have a lot of customers coming into different, Walmarts and Sam's and things like that that come into the city from outside of Ferguson. So when you take all that into account, do I think those numbers as far as African American individuals that were cited were way out of range? Probably not.
Do you think, maybe this is the wrong question to ask, but do you think that everything we've talked about here, about using courts as revenue generators, is a sufficient enough excuse to say, yeah, okay, I can understand rioting?
No, there's no excuse for that. Absolutely none. However, I can understand how folks in their mind got there to that position. I can understand it. That doesn't mean I agree with it. I can see where they had, really the pent-up anger for all the years of every time they saw the police, they were getting arrested or they were getting ticketed, or there was no positive influence from the police department on the community. So when they found a cause, and by the way, a myth, the hands up myth, when they found that, they latched onto it and said, this is our crying rally. And I thought that's where it went, and it became groupthink, and then you had a small group of individuals. I believe it started off with a small group of individuals that said, let's burn and loot, and others joined in. It's not that we haven't seen this before. We certainly have, but there's no excuse for that.
What did you mean by when you said the myth of hands up?
Well, it's pretty clear after the state investigation and then after the federal investigation, it's very clear from the forensic evidence and the witness statements that Michael Brown, did not have his hands up when he was shot. It's pretty obvious. It's pretty clear. However, I will tell you that I talked to quite a few individuals in the community that say, I'll never believe that. I'll never believe he didn't have his hands up. If one person said he did, I believe it. And you know what? I don't think we can change that, but we have to just move on and say clearly it was a myth.
The fellow that actually started that story was his partner in the robbery.
Sure.
What was the name?
Dorian Johnson.
Dorian Johnson. I've read that that Dorian Johnson has lied to the police before.
Okay. I don't have that personal knowledge. That may be the case. Clearly,
there was some case out of Jefferson City in which he had been arrested.
Clearly, he was untruthful. It was pretty obvious that he was. Unfortunately, there was nobody to debunk that myth from the very beginning.
Right.
So he was allowed to say this, and it was repeated, and it was repeated, and it was repeated. And you know about lies, you repeat them often enough, people think they're true. Mm-hmm. And that's what happened there.
Well, unfortunately, other members of the media seem to have taken up that cause
doubt.
as well.
And
led by the Post-Dispatch.
And I'm going to put some of the blame on us, police and the prosecutors' people, is we had the opportunity back then to really say, that's not true. We knew that. We knew from the investigation, from almost the very beginning, that it wasn't true. But our typical way of handling these things is you don't talk about the evidence until it's all brought out at one time. And I think you're going to see policing change in that respect. I think you saw it change after the shooting at the Mobil station in Berkeley. Do you remember that one where the Berkeley officer shot and killed the individual early in the morning after Michael Brown on the Mobil station lot at 170 in Hanley?
Right. And that mayor,
Well, not just the mayor, but the county police chief was on TV within hours saying, we have video, here's a copy of the video, we have this, we have this, we have this, we have this. And really just talking about all of the things, because the narrative had already started that another unarmed African-American young man was shot and killed by a white police officer. Mm-hmm. That was the narrative at the Mobil station. And then if you looked at social media, because I was following Twitter and the Instagram and different social media, it started that he didn't have a gun in his hand, he had a cell phone. And that narrative started. Well, as soon as they put the video out there, it really just ended that whole conversation. And one of the criticisms I had for the investigation in Ferguson was when the video was released of Michael Brown involving the store owner. If you remember that shoving, when he did the strong arm robbery at the Ferguson market, I believe that should have been released, but it should have been released much earlier than it was. It was one of those things where the Ferguson police chief, who by the way is a good friend of mine, made the decision to release that video, and at the same time released Officer Darren Wilson's name to the community at the same time. This video, it was no big secret that it was out there. The media had already heard that it was out there. But when he released it with the officer's name, it was almost kind of an in-your-face, I got to give the officer's name up, I realize that, but look what Michael Brown did. And it really did inflame it. That video should have been released much earlier, like as soon as they got it.
I want to switch topics now. We pretty well hit that one pretty hard. You left being the chief of police of St. Louis County in February 1st of 2014. People were surprised that you had left. I understand many of your fellow officers were disturbed that you left, especially at that time. Why did you decide to leave at that time?
I actually decided to leave in September of 2013, so 6 months prior to that. And the only reason I didn't leave then is because there was all this controversy on the police board. If you remember the issue with the police board chairman getting the contract to install the HVAC system.
Let's cover that, okay. Because there's a lot of people who probably don't know or don't remember that.
Well, that started in August of 2013. That all came out then. It came out then. It didn't start then. It started in January before that when I found out that he had received this contract, $3.6 million.
Who he?
Greg Sansone.
Okay. And he was the chairman of the police board, and he'd got a contract from the county to do heating and cooling work.
For the new police crime lab.
Okay. And under the rules, is a person like that allowed to have a contract?
The county charter is very clear. And what it says is if you're an appointed or elected official of St. Louis County government, you cannot have any financial interest in any type of contract with county government. It's very simple. There's no wiggle room whatsoever. Mm-hmm. So when he told me that he received this contract through a general contractor, so he had a general contractor hired for the crime lab job, the general contractor subbed to Greg Sansone's company. It was called SM Mechanical. So SM Mechanical gets this almost $4 million contract with the general contractor to put in the HVAC for the police crime lab. Well, when you're the police board chairman and you're now going to make almost $4 million off of a police crime lab, and the charter says you can't do that, that's an issue for the police chief when I discovered this. So I discovered this in January of 2013 and went to County Executive Dooley and said, do you know your police board chairman has this nearly $4 million contract with St. Louis County government?
And the answer was?
The answer was a real soft no. I didn't know he did. Well, I was a homicide detective for many, many years. And one of the things that you do when you work crimes and homicide is you do statement analysis, and you learn how people talk and body language. And it was pretty clear to me that the county executive knew that he had this, but felt that it was okay.
Mm-hmm. But now he knew, because you told him.
I told him.
Now what was he supposed to do?
That was up to him at that point. But I will tell you that what happened after that is then I went to the chief operating officer, a guy by the name of Gary Earls, who basically was the county manager. And I said, did the county executive tell you I talked to him 4 hours ago and told him about the police board chairman? He said, no. Here's what I know. He got this contract. And immediately, Gary Earls said he can't do that. He's not allowed to have that. It's a violation of the charter. I said, I'm familiar with that. That's why I'm bringing it to you. He said, okay, I'll get back with you. 2 days later, he comes in, shuts the door, wants to talk, and he said, talk to the county counselor, talk to the county executive, it's all good. Leave it alone. Okay? So that was in January.
Of 2013.
Yes, January 2013. Now, speed up to August of 2013. August of 2013, somehow or another, the media starts finding out about this crime lab. You know, there are no secrets. People that think they could keep these things secret, they're only kidding themselves. So now it's 2013, and the media comes to me and says, we need to talk to you about your police board chairman and about this crime lab.
Has this contract been issued?
Yes.
And he had been
He's working
collecting
on it.
money?
Sure.
Okay.
Let's back up just a little bit. I told you I talked to Gary Earls, the chief
Right.
COO. After that, after he came to me and said, it's okay, leave it alone, I went to the prosecuting attorney, Bob McCullough, and said, just so you know, here's what's going on. And Bob McCullough said he can't do that. It's a violation of the charter. Here's the problem with the charter. It's enforced by the St. Louis County Counselor, who's appointed by Charlie Dooley. It's not enforced by the prosecutor. And the enforcement mechanism is you forfeit your seat. So according to the charter, Greg Sansone should have forfeited his seat as the police board
And kept
chairman.
the contract.
And could have kept the contract, but he'd have to forfeit his seat.
Right.
He had no intention of forfeiting his seat or getting
Or
rid of the
giving up
contract.
the money.
So Bob McCullough said, there's nothing I can do about it. It's not a violation of state law. It's a violation of the charter. The charter is enforced by the county counselor. But remember, the county counselor was one of the people that said it's all good. Well, does that surprise you? She's hired by the county executive. Her name was Pat Reddington. And basically, when Charlie would get himself in a jam, he'd go to the county counselor and say, help me out of this. So she basically issued an opinion and said it's all good because he was a subcontractor, not the contractor. So he didn't directly get the contract from St. Louis County. He got it through the general contractor. But here's the issue. Greg Sansone was initially declined and eliminated from the bidding process because he didn't have union labor or pay prevailing wage. So he was disqualified. And the next lowest bidder was selected for the HVAC. Okay? So 3 days later, the next lowest bidder gets a phone call from the general contractor who said, never mind, forget it, we now have to give it back to Mr. Sansone. So when I received this information about, well, what happened here is when I went to the FBI and said, you probably want to look at this. It's probably a violation of federal law. There's some reason why he was disqualified, then got it back. I didn't believe the FBI would do anything about the charter violation. That's not their role. But could there be a federal violation? So they started investigation, issued subpoenas and all of that. So that was all going on. Well, in the
This
meantime,
is when the political establishment is now mad at you.
yes, certainly Mr. Dooley was very, very upset, especially that I went to the FBI. He said it was something like me going behind his back. Instead of coming to him, I did already come to him. Remember in January when I went to him and he said it was all good? So I already went to him and he said it was all good. I didn't think it was all good, so that's why I went to the FBI. And by the way, how would this have turned out if the media found out I knew all about this and didn't say anything to anybody? You know, then I'm not doing my job as a law enforcement officer. I have an oath. And I take it very seriously and took it very seriously, enough so that I called the FBI and said, look into this. And by the way, I liked Greg Sansone. We got along just fine as the police board chairman. It didn't do me any give me any thrill to run off to the FBI or the county executive and report anything that he was doing. We got along just fine. So, but it was my duty. I had no choice. At any rate, so I was offered a position to start my own consulting business in September of 13. And I was going to leave then. The only reason I didn't is because if you remember, the police board fell apart. You had Gene Warman, who was the vice chairman, under a discussion with the U.S. Attorney's Office, stepped down from his position. And then you had Greg Sansone step down from his position. And then you had Ray Wagner step down from his position. Well, there's only 5 members. Now there's only 2 left.
No quorum.
So I could not leave in September because they couldn't have picked a police chief if they wanted to, because there's no quorum. So I didn't want to leave this kind of up in the air. So what I waited for is till December, when they finally got a 3rd person approved for the police board. That was T.R. Carr, the former mayor of Hazelwood, great guy.
Yeah,
good addition.
He's been here.
Good addition to the board. Was very happy to get him on the board. But the night that he was approved by the council to serve on the board, the next day is when I announced my retirement.
I see. We got about 3-4 minutes left here.
Okay.
There was another issue with and this was big news, but we're just going to review it. There was a fellow who worked for the health department, or he was the head of the health department, who wound up committing suicide. Briefly, what was that story all about?
His name was Ed Muth. What a tragedy to commit suicide, but clearly he knew he was going to go to prison for a long, long time, and he chose the alternative. But basically what he had done was he was the number 2 person in the county health department. Nice man, met him many times. Never would have suspected that he would have done this. But basically he was given so much authority in the health department. One thing you never do is give one person total authority over anything financial. He was allowed to approve contracts when they came in, to change price, all types of just huge mistakes, why anybody thought it was a good idea to do this. But what happened was is he set up a phony company, put in bids to sell the county computer services and laptops, things like that. Well, the county kicked it back to this company and said, we can't do this, we need 3 bids. So he started 2 more companies under different names. So what he did is submitted these bids, all 3 of them, they were all him. Guess what? He got the contract, and he kept it for a long, long time and made it over almost $4 million.
And how did that get found out?
That got found out from a new auditor, a new accountant in the health department who came over from MSD. And when she came over, she went, this isn't how I've ever seen business done when it comes to bids and all these things. So she started looking into it, and then they discovered, guess what? He's Gateway. That's him. So what they did is they went to Gary Earls, you heard that name earlier, the COO, and said, we think this guy's stealing from St. Louis County to the tune of millions of dollars. Well, instead of contacting the police right away like they should have, they decided to handle this all internally and call him in the next morning to basically find out what's going on, and he killed himself the night before.
I see. So again, Mr. Earls, and then there's former county executive Charlie Dooley. Here in the last minute or so, has all of this just died down, or is there still some judicial action on either of these 2 cases?
Well, I think the next biggest one that you saw Earls and Dooley involved in is the settlement last week for the trash haulers. Again, St. Louis County paying out over $5 million on something that the county councilor said it's all good, and then it's costing me and you as residents of St. Louis County almost $6 million now.
Well, that's in the charter. They
absolutely.
It's set, and
they violated state law, and all along people were saying you're violating state law. And county councilor and Charlie Dooley said it's all good because we get to make up our own laws through our charter. And the Supreme Court went all the way there and said, no, you don't get to do that.
Yeah.
Good riddance is all I could say.
Well, I'll be interested to see how the new county executive begins the financial cleanup process.
I have a lot of hope in the new county executive, and I knew Steve Stanger well before he ran for county executive. He was always a big law enforcement supporter, and like I said, I have a lot of hope for his administration.
Well, thank you very much for coming in here on a busy day and spending some time with us. I certainly appreciate hearing from you.
All right, Lee, my pleasure.
Well, thanks. I've been speaking with Tim Fitch. He is the former St. Louis County Police Chief. I believe the term was Colonel. Was that right?
Right.
Yeah, they used to call him Colonel. Now he's a private businessman and probably a lot happier at that, too. For those of you who are interested, this is going to be uploaded to YouTube, so if you want to show it to your friends, go to YouTube and look up Conversation with Lee Presser, Tim Fitch. Thank you very much. See you next time.